On a windy morning in the autumn of 1940, a brand new suspension bridge in the state of Washington began to do something no bridges ever supposed to do. It started to dance. Into the roadway, hundreds of meters of steel and concrete paused and fell and then began to twist, one edge lifting toward the sky, while the other plunged toward the water, over and over, faster and harder, until the whole structure tore itself to pieces and crashed into the stretch below. The most astonishing part is that people filmed it, so we can still watch a modern bridge ride like a ribbon in the wind. For decades, school books explained this disaster with one simple word that turned out to be wrong. In the next few minutes, you are going to understand what really destroyed the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, why the popular explanation is a myth, and how a beautiful, slender, award-worthy design contained a hidden flaw that made it a death trap in a gentle breeze. To understand the failure, you first have to understand what everyone was trying to do. In the 1930s, suspension bridge design was in a haste toward elegance. Engineers had learned to build longer and thinner, and the fashion of the day was slenderness. A slim, graceful bridge used less fuel, cost less money, and looked breathtaking, a delicate thread stretched across a gap. The man at the cutting edge of this movement was a celebrated engineer named Leon Moisseiff, one of the most respected bridge designers in the world. He had helped to shape some of the great suspension bridges of the era, and he championed the mathematical approach that argued a bridge deck could be made lighter and thinner than tradition, a load because the main cables would share the load. On paper, the numbers worked. Also, when the state of Washington wanted to cross the Tacoma Narrows, a windy stretch of water, Moisseiff designed something spectacular. It would be the third longest suspension bridge on the planet, and by far the most slender ever attempted. A roadway so thin it looked almost impossibly delicate, but that slenderness hid a fatal choice. To save weight and to give the bridge its clean, elegant lines, the sides of the roadway were made from solid steel plates, tall flat walls of metal running the length of the deck. Older, heavier bridges used open lattices of crisscrossed beams, which let the wind pass straight through. Moisseiff's design blocked it. And here is the thing that nobody on the project fully appreciated at the time. A tall, flat, solid surface does not just resist the wind. It catches it, the way a sail catches it, or the way the wing of an aeroplane interacts with the air rushing over it. The bridge was not just a road, without anyone intending it. It had become a giant, badly designed wing. The trouble started almost immediately. Before the bridge even opened during construction, workers noticed that the deck moved. On breezy days, the whole roadway would gently rise and fall in long, rolling waves, like the surface of the sea. This was unsettling, but it did not seem dangerous, and the movement was mostly up and down, a vertical bobbing. The bridge earned a nickname from the construction crews and later from the public. They called it Galloping Gertie, because driving across it on a windy day felt like riding a galloping horse, the road ahead rising and jeeping in front of you. Astonishingly, this became a tourist attraction. People drove from far away to experience the thrill of crossing the bouncing bridge. Engineers tried to calm the motion, adding cables and hydraulic devices to dent the bobbing, but nothing really worked. Still, everyone believed it. The bridge was safe. It was bending, yes, but bending is what a flexible bridge is supposed to do. What they did not understand was that gentle up and down galloping was not the real danger. It was only a warning. The real danger arrived on the morning of the 7th of November, 1940, just over 4 months after the bridge had opened to traffic. The wind that day was not even a storm. Was blowing at around 65 kilometers an hour, a strong breeze, the kind of wind the bridge had already survived many times. At first, the deck jigged its usual galloping, the familiar hauling ways, and then, quite suddenly, the motion changed into something completely different and far more sinister. The bridge stopped bobbing up and down and began to twist. One side of the roadway would rise while the other side dropped, so the flat deck rolled from edge to edge, like a person wringing out a wet towel. Its twisting, called a torsional motion, grew violently, the roadway tilting at steeper and steeper angles until the edges were swinging through many meters. A man who was on the bridge had to abandon his car and crawl to safety on his hands and knees, clinging to the curb as the road heaved beneath him. On the cruelest detail of the whole story, a small dog was trapped in that abandoned car and could not be savaged. For about an hour, the bridge twisted itself apart until sections of the roadway had to loose and plunged into the water far below. There is a reason this particular collapse is burned into engineering memory, while so many others are forgotten. It was watched and it was filmed. Engineers had already been worried about Galloping Gertie, and an engineering professor had been out there studying the bridge, trying to understand its restless motion when the fatal twisting began. Cameras were rolling. And so, for the first time in history, the death of a great modern structure was captured on film in broad daylight, second by second. The footage is haunting. You see a solid hard surface, a thing that's supposed to be as still and dependable as the ground itself, howling and buckling like the deck of a ship in a hurricane, lamp posts whipping through the air, the whole span corkscrewing until it shatters. That film became one of the most studied pieces of footage in the history of engineering. Generation after generation of students has watched it, not as a horror show, but as evidence, a moving record of a force that theory alone had failed to predict. A disaster that might have been a footnote instead became a permanent teacher, precisely because someone was there with a camera when the impossible happened. So what actually happened? For a long time, the popular answer, the one printed in physics textbooks for generations, was a single word, resonance. The idea was that the wind was somehow pushing the bridge in rhythmic little shoves, chimed perfectly to match the bridge's natural swaying, the way you push a child on a swing at just the right moment to send them higher and higher. It is an innate story, and it is wrong. The wind that day was not gusting in any innate rhythm. It was blowing more or less steadily. There was nothing to provide those perfectly timed pushes. The truth is more subtle, more interesting, and this is on this bridge changing engineering forever. The real culprit was a phenomenon called hydroelastic flutter. Let us build up what that means in plain language, because it is the heart of the whole story. Remember that the solid-sided deck behaved like a wing. When a steady wind hit the deck and the deck was tilted even slightly, the air peeling off the sharp edges formed swirling pockets of low pressure, little tornadoes called vortices. Crucially, those low-pressure pockets formed in exactly the wrong places. They pulled on the deck in the same direction. It was already twisting. So the bridge would twist a little. The wind would respond by pulling it to twist a little more, and that new position would tell the wind to pull harder still. The structure was feeding energy into its own motion. This is the key difference from resonance. In resonance, an outside force pushes in rhythm. In flutter, there is no rhythm from outside at all. The bridge itself, by moving, changes how the wind pushes on watch, and the wind pushes in a way that makes the bridge move even more. It is a feedback loop, a runaway cycle of energy, where the motion creates the very force that grows the motion. If that still feels abstract, picture something simpler. Hold a thin strip of paper by one and then blow steadily across the top of each. The paper does not just sit there. It starts to flutter and flap, snapping up and down, even though your breath is perfectly smooth and constant. You are not puffing in rhythm. The flapping appears all on its own, because once the paper bends a little, it changes the airflow in a way that bends it further, and the motion sustains itself. Now imagine That strip of paper is a roadway hundreds of meters long, made of steel and concrete and weighing thousands of tons, and you begin to grasp the horror of what happened over the Tacoma Narrows. Same flapping that makes a flag ripple, and the heat whistle was at a colossal scale, strong enough to snap a modern bridge like a twig. The wind was not attacking the bridge. The bridge and the wind together had formed an engine that manufactured its own destruction. Once that look took hold, the bridge was doomed. Every twist harvested a little more energy from the steady wind and started a violent movement. With almost nothing to damp it out, the twisting climbed and climbed until the steel simply could not take the strain, and it failed. The wind did not need to be strong. It only needed to be steady and to blow long enough for the feedback loop to build. That is why a mere breeze could destroy a bridge that looked, on paper, more than strong enough to survive a hurricane. The bridge was not defeated by force. It was defeated by an instability designed, unknowingly hiding to its shape. And it is the lesson that makes this collapse one of the most important in history. The engineers of that era had learned to calculate strength. They knew exactly how much weight their bridges could carry, how much a cable could hold, how the loads would flow through the steel. What they had not learned to think about was how a structure would behave dynamically, how it would move and interact with the wind that flowed around it. Moisseiff's design was not incompetent by the strength rules of his time. It was brilliant, elegant, and efficient. The flaw lived in a blind spot that the entire profession shared. Nobody was asking whether a bridge could be shaken apart by eye, because nobody yet fully understood that a bridge could act like a wind. The failure changed everything. The wreck was studied obsessively, and it forced engineers to invent whole new fields of study. After Tacoma, bridge designers began building scale models of their bridges and placing them inside wind tunnels, blasting them with air to watch for these dangerous motions long before a single beam was erected in the real world. The idea that you must test our structural dances with the wind, not just whether it can bear a low add, became a permanent rule. Every great bridge built since owes something to the lessons pulled from that wreckage. There is a woman cost to this kind of lesson too. Leon Moisseiff had been one of the most admired engineers of his generation, among whose name opened doors and whose theories shaped the skyline of an era. The collapse fell across his reputation like a shadow, and as I dawned a few years later, his legacy forever tangled with the bridge that came down. It is worth remembering that he was not careless. He was working at the very frontier of what was known, and the frontier is exactly where the unwise in wait. It is the tragedy of a brilliant man defeated by a question the whole world had not yet learned to ask. That is what makes it such a powerful warning. The most dangerous mistakes are rarely the sloppy honest. They are the confident, elegant, award-winning honest, built right at the age of human understanding. The bridge was eventually rebuilt across the same strait, opening 10 years later, and this time the engineers had learned. The new deck was not a solid wall. It was made of intrusives, a web of crisscross steel that let the wind pass straight through, instead of catching it like a sail, and it was made deeper and stiffer so it would not twist too easily. Locals gave the replacement a new affectionate nickname. The first one was Galloping Gertie. The sturdy, steady new bridge became known as Sturdy Gertie. It still stands today, calming the same winds that tore its predecessor apart. The Tacoma Narrows bridge is remembered not as a single failure, but as one of the most valuable lessons engineering ever received. It taught an entire profession a humbling truth. Being strong is not the same as being stable. A structure can be perfectly capable of holding enormous weight and still be destroyed by something as gentle as a breeze if its shape lets the forces around it build on themselves. The collapse was a catastrophe, but the knowledge it forced into the world has carefully protected every bridge, tower, and skyscraper built since. If you find yourself fascinated by the reason's great structures file and by the invisible forces that engineers now design against because of disasters like this one, subscribe to Collapse Engineered and turn on the bell. The next Failuri we take apart carries its own hard lesson, written in steel and paid for in advance so that we would not have to learn it again.